Thanks for joining us, Dion. So today, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in the educational space? And I'd love to have a little talk today about how COVID-19 and the coronavirus is affecting parents, teachers, schools, and all of those different players in the educational space.
Yeah, obviously, Greg, thanks for having me. It's been an incredible sort of couple of weeks for everybody. We've been in online delivery of educational resources for a long time, and we've noticed a massive upspike in the last couple of days, weeks even, of people scrambling for online resources that they've probably never even heard of and don't know how to use. And it's causing quite a lot of anxiety out there amongst the general population, not just amongst teachers, but parents, school administrators, and everybody's basically trying to learn a new language in a couple of weeks, which is almost impossible.
Yeah.
But I'm really positive about the way people are adopting these technologies and how they're making innovations and using them in ways that they probably were never intended to be used for, and it's really expanding the space at the moment.
Yeah, so you were telling me you've been in the space for about 5 years, so you've obviously had to deal with parents and teachers and students who use online technology to learn, and now all of a sudden it's just rampant, everyone's doing it, all at the same time at once, across Australia. So,
yeah, that's
the
right.
world.
Yeah, look, I would say that it's probably the online usage is probably climbing at the same rate as the virus is spreading.
Yeah.
It's exponential at the moment, and everybody wants something that's going to give them peace of mind in a moving landscape.
Yeah. So just obviously this has come all at once. So to try and find the right support is going to be really hard for business owners and just people with parents in general. So what are some things that parents can do to prepare for this and get into it?
Well, I mean, a very sort of brief overview is first and foremost, don't panic. That's one of the things that we want to stress to the parents, that this is a process that's evolving. Your school teachers and the schools that you've been involved with, they are experts in the delivery of education. And the thing that they're finding perhaps most difficult at the moment is how to deliver online education en masse to the populace. So don't be alarmed if the rollout's a little slower than you think it should be, or that the students are not getting the volume of work that you think that they should be getting at the moment. That will increase as the teachers become far more familiar with the platforms that they're using. But in general, I suppose there's a few things that you can do and to prepare for this, or to before anything even starts. And one of those would be to make sure that your environment is prepared for the use of your kids and working at home. So as you would with a home office, just make a schedule for the kids. Try and keep it as familiar as possible. Try and reduce the intrusions and the breaks and the distractions from them. Make sure that they have a plan, and also make sure that you and your children are prepared for what's coming ahead.
Yeah. Would you recommend that parents try and keep the same sort of routine that they have at school, or is it going to be quite different when they're at home?
Look, it's going to depend largely on the school, of course, but a lot of schools are trying to run a normal timetable when they go into this remote learning situation, in which case the kids will be using their learning management system, their LMS, to log in to school at the start of every day and try and adhere to the timetable as closely as they possibly can to make it a normal school day. That's not always the case. Some schools won't be as advanced as that, and they may have issues delivering online education to their students, but ideally try and stick with the routine that you know, even if the school hasn't prescribed that.
Yeah. Have you heard of any schools actually doing live feeds to the students at home?
Yeah, we have. Yes, a lot of schools are linked with Microsoft Teams or with Zoom or with or Skype or one of those, one of the mediums that we're using now, and a lot of probably the most progressive schools are delivering online lectures where the online classrooms where the students are logging in with their teacher and the teacher's delivering some sort of content live to them for maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Yep.
And then they move to another part of their LMS to do some prescribed work.
Yeah. So instead of writing it out, they would be on the computer doing their Q&As or short description sort of answers to the test questions and stuff like that, and then they would come back again. Is that sort of what it's looking like? Yep.
That's right, yeah. Or maybe they log off and they do some revision work at home.
Yep.
Then log back on before the end of the class. Those sorts of strategies are being implemented.
Yeah, so I think the big question would be, how do you manage your kids and make sure that they're doing the work once they come off that live call? Because that's obviously that accountability. Is there some system in place, like is the LMS going to be enough to prove that they've done the work at the right time? Or is that some things that parents can do to make sure their kids are making sure that they're doing it?
Look, I think it's going to be it's going to be a movable feast, that one. Most schools are trying to make sure that students are preparing themselves by putting themselves in a visible position within the house, a quiet but visible position, so that the parents can take a look at the screens easily, and making sure that the students are staying on task. A lot of teachers are asking students to screen share while they're on tasks, and there's a lot of ability now for students to be able to do that, so that the teacher can look in and see that the student is doing the work that's being assigned to them.
Yep. Has there been any kids yet who have created a bot to make it look like they're doing the work?
No doubt, mate, no doubt.
Also, that gave me an idea for parents. Like, parents could call their kids, if you're working on a computer, you could call your kids and get them to screen share, and you just have it up just like now. If we were doing a screen class using this, we could see the screen. So while you're doing your work, you could have it up in the corner.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's another way of keeping on top of the kids. I think we've got to be careful in this environment not to micromanage those kids. We don't, as parents, we don't micromanage what they do at school while they're at school.
Yep.
And, with the best intentions and understanding all the complexities that go along with it, we want to trust that they're doing the work that they've been assigned, and without hovering over them.
Can you give me some example of some of the best school models you've seen? So there's obviously people trying at the moment, and there's schools out there trying to get the right information. What's some of the models you've seen, just like wow, that is great, that's working, parents are happy, teachers are happy, kids are happy? What's some examples that you could give there?
Well, each school, I'll be careful here, because each school has their own preferred method of delivery, and that's maybe it's across the Catholic network that they're delivering a certain way of a certain method, and then through Department of Education they might be delivering a slightly different method, and each one is equally valid. But what makes it work properly is the connection between the students and their teacher, and also the preparedness of the household to make sure that the environment is right for the delivery of that process whilst the kids are at home.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And is there any tips for parents around that process for at home that you could give?
It's difficult because some of the challenges that people are facing are that certainly in my family at least as well. I'm not immune to this myself, but I've got four. 2 university students, 1 high school student, and a primary school student, all working simultaneously in their areas. But it's very difficult to make sure that our environment's right, especially when you're talking about multiple people working on their own thing, because you might have parents involved with that as well. So we're a household that doesn't have 6 devices. We can't all be doing the same thing at the same time. So we have to schedule properly to make sure that the classes that are being delivered by the school are being able to be attended by the student. We've got to make sure our internet is high speed. We've got to make sure that we've got enough data to make that transition. We've got to make sure that the space, and this is probably a very important one, is make sure that the space is calm and quiet and very conducive to learning. It's not easy because you can't necessarily throw all the kids into their bedrooms and say go and work, because you can't monitor, and it's a bit difficult unless they're screen sharing. You've got to be able to make sure that when one child is, maybe they're at different schools, and certainly in our case they are, the class times are different, they overlap. Sometimes one's on a break while the others are learning. Making sure that the noise is low, so there will be some verbal interaction between the teachers and the students, and between students themselves, and we've got to make sure that everyone in your household has got the ability to manage that without sort of interrupting a parent's business call, maybe, or maybe there's a call going on between a school teacher and the student, and then there's another one going on between parents and their workspace, and it's got to be very carefully managed. I think it's not going to be easy.
And how are kids keeping through this period of coronavirus and COVID-19? Like, what are some things that kids are doing to keep those connections with their friends? Is there any things that you're seeing people doing to keep that connection up?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of sporting groups and a lot of social groups and so on are starting to put on little meeting rooms, so like Zoom chats or Skype chats, or they're all logging in as a group, and it can, if done well, it can be treated like a recess break, where you say, right, okay, we're on recess now, and then the kids log in and chat with each other and just interact. But we want to be careful to minimise the isolation between the students from their social group. Yeah. That could be a lot of fun anyway, just talking in a different modality, Absolutely, and they love it. They think it's something fantastic, depending on the age, of course. We recently implemented, and we talked about this before, but recently implemented a system where we have our meetings over conference call, even though we're in locality of each other, instead of everyone coming to the office where you've got a group of 15 people and you're sort of trying to talk to everyone, and you've got this gap between everyone, and they're sort of drifting off and looking around and on their phones and not completely engaged through the meeting. Since going to like the conference calls, it's like we'd never sit this close to each other. It's like our knees would be touching, in real life. So it's a really intimate way to speak to people, but you can speak to like 15 people at the same time that close. So it's a powerful tool. And I will preface this by saying that we're working through a very, very difficult situation, and everybody's got to stay safe and well. But what's exciting about it is that we're waking up to a new way of doing things, and we're finding innovative ways to keep the connections that we've had in real life. And more importantly, for people like me of my generation, where we may have shunned technology before as an important part of our lives, now we're waking up to the fact that it is a very, very powerful medium for doing business and doing an education and all sorts of other things. Mm-hmm.
So obviously you're saying minimise the time for people to be distracted throughout the day, and obviously people are going to get bored, or what are some of the things that you've noticed in students working and studying from home? What are some of the things you've noticed work well in terms of minimising distraction and minimising boredom? Is that just through the curriculum is built in a certain way, or is there some other things that parents can do to help here?
Well, certainly teachers are working very hard to provide the best variety in the curriculum that they possibly can, and it may take some time to make that optimal, but it's not going to be something that you've got to remember, I suppose, that in a classroom there are periods of excitement, there are periods of boredom, there are periods of just knuckle down and work hard, and these variances occur naturally throughout a school day, and most people are familiar with their own schooling from when they're at school. There would be times when they're writing essays where their head's on the desk and they're falling asleep, and there'll be times when they're doing other activities where they're jumping out of their skin and they can't wait to do the activity.
Yeah.
So and you've got to expect that that's still the case in an online learning environment. And we've also got to make sure that we understand that parents are not the teachers in this process.
Yep.
And as parents, we have a tendency to try and impart knowledge to the kids, and we've got to probably take a back seat on this and let the teachers do that. And we've got to understand that in a classroom situation, maybe a third of the kids understand the message the teacher's trying to deliver straight away. Others will understand on the second or third attempt at delivery, and then there'll be some that don't understand for quite a period of time, and let the teacher deal with that rather than you as a parent being the one that sort of tries to force the understanding or the learning curve to move forward a little.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Like, my kids are still quite young, but I remember myself when I was going through studies in high school and stuff like that, but also growing up, where do you find that line is? Like, where do you stop trying to teach the kid? Because sometimes I don't want to hear from you anyway as a parent, I'm finding already. So,
look, I'm in an online education space. I'm a parent, and some might consider me to be a reasonably knowledgeable person, but certainly not my children. And everybody has that. Sure, yeah. that you could be a NASA scientist working on the Mars landing, and then when you try and talk to your kid about Mars, they'll tell you, "What do you know?"
Yeah,
and it's just part of life, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So allow the student to engage with the person that they're learning from, even if you're going to get a good insight into the educational process at your school over the next few weeks.
Yep.
And you may or may not agree with the way that the teacher is teaching, and you might have an opinion on it, and you might think that you can do better. But my best advice is to zip your lip and let the teacher get on with it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe we need to take more of an approach of just asking the question to the child and letting them answer the best they can and go, "Oh, very good."
Yeah. I think one of the strategies to implement is to remember that you are a passive observer in this process, and that you're not the protagonist in the situation, and so that being a facilitator of learning rather than being a driver of learning is probably the parent's responsibility. So if you're asked by your child to answer a question, they're not sure what they're looking for, and you can provide advice, that'd be great, but best not to be pushing the learning.
Yeah, I find this really interesting, and trying to not push my opinion too much. Even at the moment, like one of my daughter's learning to sing, and so I can hear pitch really well with music, and I'm quick to jump in sometimes and go, "Oh, just do it like this," and she'll just be like, "Nah, yeah. I was right."
Yeah, so, and look, we all do it as well, Greg. We're all parents, and what we don't get, I suppose, a lot of the time in our own brains is that the schooling process is primarily about making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. And as parents, we tend not to tolerate those mistakes. We want to fix things for our kids as much as possible. And what teachers do really well is that they allow kids to go on the journey by making error after error after error without really pushing the point about fixing it immediately.
Yeah.
And I probably like that theory moving forward in this space, that as parents we will be frustrated by the fact that our kids may not be learning fast enough, or they might be struggling with concepts that we think are easy.
Yeah. And
it's just going to do no good if we inject our opinion into that process, as long as the school, I'm going to trust that the schools are directing the learning properly.
Where, as parents, do you feel like we can provide support to our kids? So you said before, be a passive observer through the process. That's in the schooling curriculum. Is there a place for parents outside of that schooling curriculum to teach certain concepts? And if so, what?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. That's a really difficult question. I'll say yes is the answer. There is. But I think that you don't want to go outside the curriculum too far. You want to think about the conversations that you have with your children about how was your day, how did you learn, what did you like about school today. These are the things that we would normally do at the end of every day when we meet our kids on the way home from school or when they come through the door. And then a conversation that you might have is, what did you like about that sort of thing, and how did you find maybe they're working on some biological concept and they did a heart dissection as an example, a frog heart, and what did you like about it, what did you learn from it, what did you find difficult, what more would you like to learn about it? Those sorts of questions are really important, and then defer back to the teacher, I think, is the best policy. Kids are very good at learning, are very good at extending their learning these days with Google and whatever else. When they find an interesting concept, they usually take a linear approach to it and learn a lot about it. And I think most of us probably understand that when we think about young children who can recite the names of dinosaurs, hundreds of dinosaurs, off their head, and they've got no degree in paleontology at that point, but they certainly got the ability to understand dinosaurs pretty intricately.
Yeah, for sure.
They can't add 3 + 2.
Yeah. So you said just then about tools that they can use to extend their learning. Is there some tools you might want to refer the kids onto? They say, I'm really excited about frogs' hearts right now. So is there somewhere we can direct? What are the tools that, as an educator, you can recommend are actual good sources of additional learning for kids? Well,
certainly I deal in the year 11 and 12 space primarily. So our company, Revise Online, is one that provides ATAR revision for kids doing their QCE or WACE or VCE, HSC type exams, and we've been through those ourselves probably as parents. But TED Ed is a very good sort of tool. Khan Academies will go through curriculums with you. But as we go to the lower levels, sort of middle school and below, Greg, I'm sorry, I don't familiarise myself a lot with what's available in that space.
No, that's okay. No, I think those just there also, TEDx and Khan Academy, I've used myself, and really good for teaching various concepts. So
I think that the TED Ed one is more about sticking within sort of school curriculum. I'd be challenged on that, but I think that's the case.
So with the parents teaching from home now, what are some of the things you've seen in the past when parents actually start to have online home learning for extended periods of time? What are some of the things that you've noticed?
Look, I think the journey for all of us as parents, especially if we're trying to be a little more active or proactive in the process, is that I think we tend to have a little bit less respect, and I'll say that in in a nice, meaningful way, less respect for the value of the teacher when we first start this, because I think all parents have been to school at some point. Everybody's familiar with the schooling environment, but that doesn't make you a great educator. And remembering that your teachers have been to university, they've studied this for 4 years at university, and they are very, very good, especially if they've had a bit of experience, very good at understanding the needs of students and the pathways to knowledge. So as a teacher, as a parent going home for the first day with your child might actually be a really good bonding experience. It's something that you enjoy together, and that it could all be sort of rainbows and lollipops where you sit down and you, I don't know, depending on the level of your student, but you can get in and you can help them learn and you can be part of that journey with them. And it seems like a teacher is almost redundant in that process. However, a couple of days in, you might find yourself in a different situation, keeping kids on track, making sure that they do the work that they're supposed to do. What happens when they start refusing to do the tasks that have been set? What happens when they start refusing to sit down at the time that you want them to sit down at? How do you keep them from just being distracted? Do you start yelling at them? Do you start tying them to a chair? Do you make to try and keep them on task? I'm only joking with the tying of the chair.
Yeah.
But whatever works,
Yeah.
And then soon enough you're going to be in that position where you're constantly fighting with them to keep their noise down while the other kids in the room are working, trying to keep them on task while, one child might be on task while another's working off, is taking the opportunity to move off task, and you've only got one set of hands and eyes, and it's going to be quite difficult. And by the time they finish this, you just never want to see those sorts of monsters in your house again, I think.
So do you think it's going to be a different experience for every step up of children you have at this point?
Yeah, I think so. You're going to be managing students. I mean, certainly in my situation where I'm managing primary and high school students, I don't think I have to keep an eye on the university students in my house, but certainly the primary and high school students together, they're different levels. They require different levels of interaction, and they'll require different levels of supervision too.
So it really seems like maybe at the end of this, the parents will have a greater appreciation for teachers.
I hope so, because I think it's going to be it will be a difficult situation for parents. They will be out of their depth at various times, and they will struggle to have strategies to cope with this. And I think that what we're seeing on social media at the moment is certainly wherever I look, I'm flooded with parents at home getting into great art projects with their children and being involved at a level that they've not been involved with before. What we're not seeing is the screaming matches across the kitchen table, or the you've got no right to interfere with my schoolwork type conversations that are inevitably going to occur and are going to be more likely to be the norm than the very pretty pictures that we're seeing of harmonious families with getting great meaning out of this experience.
Yeah, beautiful orange and teal filter over the top of that, and
absolutely
everything's looking amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we see, and certainly now at the moment, all I see on the media is those visions of balconies in Italy, singing from balconies and so on, and it's a minute out of somebody's day. What we're not seeing is all the anguish and hurt behind those pictures of people who are just going stir crazy.
So just on that, so social media is a thing for parents to be aware of, I guess, and seeing other parents going through like the perfect experience on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. What do you have to say to those? Like, it's probably just what you said, but to extend on that around, not feeling discouraged if your family's not going through that same picture perfect, because the reality is probably not like that.
Yeah. The reality is it's not going to be like that. And I think we all recognise that now from, sort of our lives are not Instagram moments 100% of the time. And most of those moments are manufactured for a photo opportunity. And to be able to post how beautiful your life is on Instagram while your kids are at home is going to be fleeting as much as those Instagram moments are. And there's going to be some level of normality, and we've got to all recognise that normality is not as pleasant as we would like it to be.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's as parents that for every very cute baby picture that you have of your child, there's 17 hours of screaming in the background.
And no sleep.
No sleep, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of the fact that this is a real life experience, and it's going to be something that you need to probably draw on your reserves of mental strength to get through.
Yeah.
But when you come out of it, I think you'll have a better appreciation of what your teachers do for your students, for your kids. So you'll have if you think about the experience that you're about to go through when it's over, take that experience, multiply it by 30 to put it in a classroom context, condense it into a much tighter time frame during the course of the day, and then add a whole heap of phone calls from angry parents and administrators and people demanding different things upon you. And then you've got some idea of what a teacher's life is like most of the time, and you've got to wonder how they keep smiling.
Yeah.
Remembering, I think, when you next say teaching, geez, how hard can that be? You just sit and you sit and work with kids all day and talk to kids all day, and then you got 10 weeks holiday.
Yeah.
It's a different dynamic to what you actually think it is.
Yeah.
And teachers work really hard, and they work really hard to get the best out of your students. And in this point, they're working harder than ever. And they might not have the day-to-day contact, face-to-face contact that they've been having, but believe me, they're working just as hard now as they always have, if not harder. Maybe a day or a week beyond when they've learnt it, to see if they're still able to retrieve the conceptual base that they embedded a week ago. And I think we do that as parents a lot with young kids. So when we're teaching kids the alphabet, we revisit the alphabet a lot of times with our children. But as kids get a bit older, we leave that to the teachers, and the teachers do embed that into their curriculum. But also, as parents, that's one way we can help a lot, I think, is to be able to say, do you remember last Wednesday when you did that? Now, do you remember much about it? Tell me about it. See if you can talk me through the concepts. Those sorts of things probably become important.
Is there any tools that are provided by the school to keep us up to date as parents with that information, or is that something we have to do ourselves through our own task management system?
Look, I think, again, depending on how involved your school is with providing a curriculum, that will be incorporated in what the kids are learning. Revisiting concepts is something that teachers do very regularly, but it's probably a case of, in a non-confronting way, going back with your students and asking them about something that they may have learnt a couple of weeks ago, or giving, I don't know if parents are comfortable with quizzing their children on things, but certainly at least talking the concept through with them maybe is something. If you know that your child found something really difficult, as an example of that, trigonometry, as they're picking that up, then maybe a week ago, in a week's time, saying, do you mind explaining to me the basis of the internal angles of a triangle, or whatever it might be?
Yeah. If it was me, this is probably, like, I've only got a 6 and a 3-year-old, but I imagine the way that I talk to people and interact, I'd probably be ignorant for them, so that when I come back a week later, I'd say, like, hey, do you mind showing me that again? I was trying to remember how to do that, and then come in that from that angle rather than I know, but you need to tell me because
that's right.
like,
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, kids, again, as they get older, they see through that little trick a little.
do they?
Yeah.
And then I was just with the way that my mind works, I was just thinking, all right, I'd probably like walk away and put it in my task manager, like, date it for a week's time to come back and be like, talk about that thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'll know when your kid's struggling with different things, and hopefully a lot of us will remember that concept as being quite difficult when we went through school.
Yeah.
And just getting them to explain it or getting them to show you some basic understanding of it is probably a pretty good way to go. I know certainly as kids get a bit older, and I know I often lost track of my children's where they were at when they were in sort of year 9, 10, 11 and 12. And it becomes a little difficult because you may have forgotten the things yourself as well.
Yeah, I'm worried about that.
You're
the chemistry and the,
you're unlikely to sit down and with your 16-year-old and say, explain the point of view of the author, the narrator in this piece you've just read.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily going to be that easy.
Yeah.
Still talking to them about it is going to help. At least re-jog their information, their memory and their recall.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Great. Is there any other messages before we finish up around how parents can navigate this space that we might not have covered already in the house when everyone's there?
Look, be kind to each other, be forgiving. Things aren't always going to work out the way that you expect them to work out. Be resilient, be determined to get through what you've got to get through. But overall, I suppose, be flexible. Make sure that if the logistics of your household prevent something from happening at a time that it's designed to be done, then go back and revisit it as quickly as you possibly can and make sure that everything's covered. And again, that comes back to good planning, good scheduling, being fully resourced if and where you can, and making yourself not so much as a parent being knowledgeable about the content that's going to be delivered to your children, but being knowledgeable about the process that is going to be undertaken and how the children are going to be delivered that information, and being careful that you can manage the process rather than trying to manage the delivery of the content.